Welcome back to When Harry Met Board Games. Today we continue our People's Choice Top 100 Board Games of all time, covering games number 40 through 31. We've surveyed over 3,300 board game designers, publishers, reviewers, content creators, and enthusiasts, and these are the results that we've come up with. So without any further ado, let's get straight to the list. The People's Choice number 40 board game of all time is Eldritch Horror, designed by Corey Konieczka and published by Fantasy Flight Games within their Arkham Horror File line of games. And Eldritch Horror is just that. It's a Cthulhu Mythos game where players take on the role of a group of investigators traveling the world. The board actually is a map of the entire world, and players are traveling the world in order to fight monsters, close gates, all in the efforts to defeat the big bad that is the Elder One for that particular scenario. And the game comes with a good amount of investigators for players to choose from, a good amount of Elder Ones, big bads, who come with their own unique mystery cards, which basically govern the direction of that particular scenario. The game comes with lots of opportunities for players to level up their stats, to acquire additional assets, artifacts, and spells. And basically, the players are trying to manage their two health currencies, their physical health, which is their stamina, and their mental health, which is their sanity. If any of these are fully depleted, that investigator is eliminated. However, the player is not. They can draw a new investigator from the supply. However, they'll have to start from scratch. Very thematic, immersive, cooperative experience with lots of narrative text to be read, from the mythos cards that players draw at the end of each round to all of the different encounters that players are going to be engaging depending on which region of the world they find themselves in or whether or not they're trying to close a gate. Now, last year, Eldritch Horror was on the top 100. It was ranked number 46. So it's actually climbed up 6 spots, so it's still growing in popularity, which is very impressive considering the fact that Arkham Horror 3rd edition came out not too long ago, and this is still dwarfing that game as far as that's concerned. And there's lots of other Cthulhu Mythos games that are hogging the spotlight with Eldritch Horror, but it's still doing very well at number 40. I'd like to give a shout out to the people here on the screen who have chosen Eldritch Horror as their number 1 game of all time. As far as the People's Choice goes, it's number 40. The People's Choice number 39 board game of all time is Tapestry, designed by Jamie Stegmaier and published by Stonemaier Games. And Tapestry is Jamie Stegmaier's contribution to the world of civilization-themed games. And this game here, very popular, was ranked number 65 last year. This game's not too old. I believe it came out in 2019. So it still has lots of opportunities to continue to climb on this list. And it's jumped up over 25 spots in the course of the last year because it's a very beloved game. Players actually begin the game at the beginning of time, and they actually continue to play throughout the ages until they actually reach all the way into the future. Players are trying to create the most storied history among all of the competitors around the table. There are 4 different advancement tracks that players are trying to progress through. You've got science, technology, exploration, and of course, military. Players can zero in on one particular track, or they can spread themselves out among the 4 different tracks. Throughout the course of the game, players are trying to improve their income, they're trying to build their capital cities, and they're using their unique variable player powers in order to earn victory points and also additional tapestry cards, which will basically tell the story of their civilization. I'd like to give a shout out to the people here on the screen who have chosen Tapestry as their number 1 board game of all time. As far as the People's Choice goes, it's number 39. The People's Choice number 38 board game of all time is Pandemic Legacy. And Pandemic Legacy is not the only Pandemic game. I have a spoiler. Pandemic, the regular Pandemic, did rank higher on the People's Choice. It's still to come. Pandemic Legacy, I did count it as a separate experience. I'm counting all the different Legacy seasons 0, 1, and 2, although by far the season that got the most votes is season 1. And Pandemic Legacy is Pandemic, the cooperative game about a group of players teaming up in order to prevent viruses from spreading throughout the world and finding cures to these diseases. Now, in Pandemic season, Legacy Season 1, basically you got a story, you've got a campaign, and these Legacy style games mean that components are being altered, they're being changed, they're being destroyed altogether, which leaves the game permanently changed going forward. Now, in this case, players are playing throughout the course of 12 months, and each month introduces additional missions that players are trying to accomplish, additional challenges. I'm trying my best to describe this game without giving spoilers because this game clearly has spoilers. There's so much narrative and change that takes place in the game according to what happens and what players accomplish. Players start with basic characters who they will be improving their abilities as the game progresses. As a matter of fact, players are also going to be engaging in relationships. They're going to relate to their teammates around the table in different ways that grant them additional abilities along with their base abilities. As a matter of fact, in this game, characters can actually die, so that's something to keep in mind. Now, due to the massive success of Pandemic Legacy, Season 1 in particular, the Legacy genre has exploded with so many of the designers, not only Rob Daviau, trying to explore this popular mechanism or this popular category of games. Pandemic Legacy last year was actually ranked number 14, so it's dropped down considerably, a lot. Something to consider, something about these legacy style games. There is a element of replayability or lack thereof that kind of hinders it for people who are thinking about games as far as long-term experiences. But when people play the game or experience it at least one time, it's a very enjoyable experience. I'd like to give a shout out to the people here on the screen who have chosen Pandemic Legacy as their #1 board game of all time. As far as the People's Choice goes, it's number 38. The People's Choice number 37 board game of all time is Orleans, designed by Rainer Stockhausen and published by Tasty Minstrel Games. And Orleans was actually ranked number 28 last year. It's dropped down 9 spots, but that's not too bad, considering how many new games come out each and every given year. Now, Orleans is a Euro-style game with a French medieval setting, and players are basically partaking in the mechanism known as bag building. They have a bag from which they're drawing different tiles, different tokens, and carrying out actions according to what they draw out. Players are recruiting followers and putting them to work to make use of their abilities. Players are using their different types of workers in order to gain supremacy through trade, construction, and science. Now, among the different types of workers, you got farmers and boatmen who help you gain money and additional goods. You have knights who help you expand your scope of action and who secure your expeditions. You got craftsmen who are used to build trading stations and tools in order to facilitate work. You got scholars who make progress in science, traders who open up new locations for you to use your followers, and of course, you got monks in your monasteries in order to make you less susceptible to fate. Now, there's lots of different paths of victory in this game, as in many other popular Euro-style games. I'd like to give a shout out to the people here on the screen who have chosen Orleans as their #1 board game of all time. As far as the People's Choice goes, it's number 37. The People's Choice number 36 board game of all time is Five Tribes, designed by Bruna Cathala and published by Days of Wonder. And Five Tribes last year was actually ranked number 34, so it's only dropped 2 spots. I'm very impressed about how consistent it remains. It's one of my personal favorite games as well. And in Five Tribes, basically players are playing a game of Mancala, and they have all of these meeples in 5 different colors, and they're picking up the meeples from one location, and they're dropping them off one at a time until they make it to their final destination. However, that final meeple, the color of that meeple, has to match at least one other meeple in that location. When you do so, players are going to trigger a particular action according to the color and the type of meeple that is. Also, they will be granted a special action according to the special unique action of the particular tile that they finished off in. Now, players are trying to partake in a little bit of area control because every time they empty out a tile, they'll be able to place a camel there, signifying that that tile belongs to them, and it's going to score them its victory points at the end of the game. Players have a little bit of a set collection taking place. They're drafting different cards with different resources that if they have multiple different types, they're going to score additional points exponentially. So there's lots of different ways for players to score. Definitely a point salad. The Mancala mechanism is handled very well. I like to point out the people here on the screen who have chosen Five Tribes as their #1 board game of all time. As far as the People's Choice goes, it's number 36. The People's Choice number 35 board game of all time is Dominion, designed by Donald X. Vaccarino and published by Rio Grande Games. And Dominion is the grandfather of the ubiquitous, also loved, popular mechanism, deck building. Lots of deck builders now, lots of games incorporate deck building as one of many mechanisms. But Dominion, make no mistake, is a pure deck builder. It's all that's taking place. And it's a static deck builder because you have a market of 10 kingdom cards randomly determined at the beginning of each game, and there's tons of different kingdom cards to pick from at this point. There's like 14, 15 different Dominion expansions. They just recently announced an Allies expansion that I believe is coming out in 2022. And you're picking from these 10 different cards, and there's only a certain supply of each card. So once that supply runs out, other players are out of luck and they won't be able to draft that card or purchase that card. And players are trying to strengthen their deck. Their deck starts very weak and they're trying to acquire additional cards that are going to optimize their actions. It's going to allow them to take additional actions to accrue additional money, and they're going to use that money to purchase additional cards. In particular, they're trying to purchase victory cards that are going to give them victory points at the end of the game. Once the game is over, the player with the most victory points is the winner of the game. I find this game to be so clean, so smooth, so streamlined, especially if you remove the attack cards. The attack cards, they kind of do clog things up, and they clog up your deck and they kind of slow things down. But if you play without attack cards, this game could easily be played within 25 to 30 minutes. Dominion here was ranked last year on the list at number 18, very high, number 18. So it's dropped down 17 spots, and that's not a surprise. This is a very old game, first released in 2008. So we're talking about 14 years. It's definitely reached that classic status. The fact that it's in the top 40 at all is very impressive. I'd like to give a shout out to the people here on the screen who have chosen Dominion as their #1 board game of all time. As far as the People's Choice goes, it's number 35. The People's Choice number 34 board game of all time is Quacks of Quedlinburg, designed by Wolfgang Warsch and published by Schmidt Spiel. And Quacks of Quedlinburg was actually ranked number 30 last year, so it's only dropped 4 spots. It's holding steady. And Quacks of Quedlinburg is another bag building game, yet another bag building game within this set of 10. We spoke about Orleans earlier on. And in Quacks of Quedlinburg, players are taking on the role of charlatans, quack doctors, who are secretly making their own home brew by adding different ingredients. Now they must be careful as they add these ingredients, because a little too much of this or too much of that and it'll spoil the whole mixture. Players have their own bag, which consists of ingredient chips, and during each round, players are simultaneously drawing these ingredient chips from their bags, and they're adding them to their pots. The higher the face value of the drawn chip, the further along it's placed along the swirling pattern, adding to the value of the potion. However, if you push your luck too much and add too many cherry bombs, your pot will explode. And the player with the most victory points at the end of 9 rounds will be declared the winner of the game. I'd like to give a shout out to the people here on the screen who have chosen Quacks of Quedlinburg as their #1 board game of all time. As far as the People's Choice goes, it's number 34. The People's Choice number 33 board game of all time is Zombicide by Command Games. And Zombicide here, I'm including all of the Zombicides because lots of different iterations did get votes, but by far the most votes came for Zombicide Black Plague. And last year, Zombicide ranked number 29, so it's dropped down 4 spots. So lots of these games in this set of 10 are remaining consistent. They are only dropping down a few spots to make room for some newer games. And Zombicide is basically a dungeon crawl cooperative style game where players are taking on the role of survivors, if you will, fighting back the hordes of zombies. Now, Black Plague in particular, players are partaking in a medieval fantastical setting where players are taking on the roles of paladins, dwarves, knights, and magicians who are wielding different powerful weapons such as swords and crossbows and even magic spells, all in the efforts to defeat the zombie hordes and the necromancer overlords. As I mentioned, this is a cooperative dungeon crawl style game. It's a scenario based game where players are going to choose a particular scenario or mission and go through it and try to accomplish its objectives. Zombicide Black Plague does come with 2 additional expansions, not to mention the fact that it's completely compatible with the Green Horde standalone game. I'd like to point out the people here on the screen who have chosen Zombicide as their #1 game of all time. As far as the People's Choice goes, it's number 33. The People's Choice number 32 board game of all time is 7 Wonders, Duel, designed by Bruno Cathala and Antoine Boza, and published by Repos Productions. And Seven Wonders Duel is basically a two-player implementation of the original Seven Wonders game, which perhaps is still to come on the People's Choice Top 100. But Seven Wonders Duel basically fixed the variant, the two-player variant that was originally included in Seven Wonders, the original game, that lots of people weren't very fond of. And they basically found a way to make a card drafting game that worked for two players. And it's really cool because you got this static row of cards, some face up, some face down, that players are drafting from. But not only are they drafting from it, but they're carefully manipulating that little market or row of cards, because as they draft particular cards, they might make other cards available for their opponent. Cards that they would not want them to get. So it's something to consider. Also, players might just draw a card that they can't even put in their civilization. Instead, they're going to be forced to discard it for some gold, but at least they'll keep it out of the hands of their opponent. Now, Seven Wonders Duel was actually ranked number 23 last year, very high, so it has dropped down 9 spots, but still very beloved in the eyes of the people. I'd like to give a shout out to those on the screen right now who have chosen Seven Wonders Duel as their #1 board game of all time. As far as the People's Choice goes, it's number 32. The People's Choice number 31 board game of all time, and the last one for today's list, is Twilight Imperium IV Edition. And this game here ranked number 25 last year. It's dropped down 5 spots, but still a very popular game considering how niche this game really is. This game here is a space-themed 4X space opera game par excellence. This game is notorious for its game length. This game can last anywhere from 6 to 12 hours, depending on the player count, depending on how much expansions players might be playing with, and depending on the pace of the players and their experience in the game altogether. Now, I personally have never played this game, but from every account I've ever heard, those who have played this game really enjoy it and describe it as a very immersive experience. The game consists of a modular setup comprised of 51 galaxy tiles that are always going to be configured in different ways. Players have different alien races with variable player powers that distinguish them from one another. And throughout the course of the game, players are trying to gain victory points by accomplishing different hidden objectives. If you enjoy space-themed games and are not intimidated by the length of this game, this is a game you absolutely have to look into. I'd like to give a shout out to the people here on the screen who have chosen Twilight Imperium as their #1 board game of all time. As far as the People's Choice goes, it's number 31. And that's it for today's list, folks. Thank you so much for joining us here on Harriman Board Games. Please comment down below and tell me what you think about this particular set of 10 games. Also, if you're interested, check in the link right here on the screen to watch my personal 10 favorite board games of all time. And don't miss us next time, as we'll be continuing the top 100, covering games number 30 through 21. That's it for today, folks. Thank you so much for joining us here on Harriman Board Games. This is Harry saying take care, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have fun gaming. Bye-bye.